on Inanimate and Sand.
Pull your fuckles and get ready for another episode of Roasting a Child.
I really hope he's going to say the N-word in a bunch of black people.
If not, I'll be forced to call the white police.
3 missed on Inanimate and Sand.
Hey, Lake, when do we get to leave?
Only when you win 100 consecutive times. We already told you.
Crap.
So, let's chat before Azrael gets knocked out again. I want to try doing a commentary. It seems interesting.
Oh, hell no, I don't recommend it.
Why not?
Well, you have my soul, and you remember what happened when I went to do a commentary with Azrael, right?
What happened? And now I have been slain. Why did you say that she was Lilia? Why?
How did you even get to my soul to begin with?
Shh. We'll explain that later.
And even in that situation you guys were in, you were with Azrael. Remember? The World Ender? She's not here, so I think we'll be fine.
Okay, go kill yourselves then.
We're both already dead, remember?
We only found this body after our souls fused. Oh, finally we're back. So, Amanda, what material do we have? Oh. This... Okay, this will be interesting.
If you paid attention to the game's discourse on the internet during 2019 and 2020, you might have noticed a reoccurring argument about some species from fantasy media, specifically orcs. Now, not to worry, this episode isn't going to be just another member of the chorus talking about how if all orcs in a game are blindly evil, that it's racist. Instead, we want to discuss how that particular choice is simply bad game design.
While also assuming intent.
Real quick up top, please welcome James Mendez-Hodes, who guest wrote this episode.
It takes a measure of maturity to own up to faults and accept responsibility. No wonder many people find it easier to pass their faults and shift the blame on others.
Much of the recent conversation on orcs points out that characterizing a whole species in your game as ugly, warlike, and malevolent might be harmful to real-world groups regularly mischaracterized as ugly, warlike, and malevolent.
Like, let's compare orcs to black people because that comparison totally makes the slightest bit of sense. Let's also compare the said people to snaggletooth and most likely idiotic, brainless orcs. I hope the ass whooping I get for this claim will be completely irrelevant by the ad revenue.
However, this video isn't that. Though if you want more on that discussion, Mendez breaks it down wonderfully over on his website, and we'll have a link to that in the description.
Blame shifters do not own up to their faults, but find it easy to blame something or someone for it.
When designing a game's world and populating it with fictional species, a designer might be tempted to differentiate them from one another by certain inalienable qualities.
Keyword being fiction, because in a minute he's gonna treat them like they're real.
Like their moral alignment. Violent versus peaceful, law versus chaos, good versus evil, and the like. It's a common trope in speculative fiction, but especially in the context of a game, painting an entire species with the same moral brush actually weakens the entire thing.
Okay, how? Because what's wrong with making a fictional race in a fictional world be evil? I mean, they're fictional, am I right? Not everything needs moral complexity, as it can actually hinder the story you want in some cases. And also, if it's most common, that means it's most successful, meaning that those tropes are what consumers want because that's what they know. But no. Let's talk about how making a game with a business perspective is wrong.
This idea that a certain subgroup, like race, nationality, or sex, has inalienable traits, is called biological essentialism, or simply bioessentialism.
I hope all the races you just mentioned through your art likes being compared to literal monsters with no human agency.
Now chances are, if a game is set in the real world, that the designers are avoiding these tropes because they aren't real, as multiple fields of societal and hard science can readily prove to you. But speculative fiction offers us an opportunity to reify or make real various things which don't exist, or to exaggerate things which do.
So that point about speculative fiction literally destroys the needs for this video because you can make anything in a fictional setting, even if it's not based on anything. Oh? The video is going to continue without any of self-awareness? Aww.
Now, bioessentialism is a tempting idea in fantasy for some of the same reasons as it is in the real world. Because to our human minds, broad generalizations are comforting. They reduce the world to simple cut and dry categories. All orcs bad, all elves good, root for these folks, not for these folks.
Considering the fact that you compared orcs to black people, I'm gonna call that projection. And also, depending on what genre you're getting and focusing on, making moral alignments complex would just sour the gameplay. What's wrong with just tropes? In fact, what's wrong with just a simple antagonistic force? You don't see Team Rocket or any other villain team in Pokemon have a complex backstory, because it isn't necessary. And also, I know several projects where elves and fantasy species and media are presented as evil. Why? Because you can do anything in a fictional setting.
But just like in the real world, bioessentialism can present problems in fiction as well, specifically a moral one. The idea that a sapient species can inherently tend towards good or evil acts, or lawful or chaotic ones.
So you can't even reference a morally evil character because it will not only infect the fictional setting, but also a consumer can cause harm? How are you getting this? Because are you assuming that humans are so mentally stunted that they can't differentiate fantasy from reality?
And that moral essentialism actually undercuts the greatest strength games can bring to storytelling. The player's own power to make meaningful, interesting choices and judgments for their characters, including moral ones.
Okay. I get the hustle that you can make a character more interesting if you contradict their roles, but simply saying that these roles can't make a good character is just wrong. What's wrong with having a simple plot? Cough.
So if a game's creative choices apply a moral valuation to every member of an entire species before the players even meet them, well, now that's just taking that power away from the players.
Assuming that you need to give power to them in the first place. Okay. I'm a game, and I'm going to provide a situation of a monster impacting the protagonist's moral compass. Imagine if you're in a town, and that town gets destroyed by a pack of slime, and they're doing it for no other reason other than the fact that it's a side effect from their mobility. They have no compass and are incapable of human thought or action because they're just slime that harm the area that they impact. Now, if the protagonist goes after these slimes, are they a bad protagonist, or that story can't be good? If you answered yes, you need to check the difference between brains of species.
And in turn, if a group of orcs, for instance, doesn't even have a choice about their actions, are they actually evil?
Hey, do you think this is supposed to be a metaphor for something?
Because look, if a person, say, destroys a house, we call that evil because they chose to do so. But if a tornado destroys a house, well, I mean, is wind evil? No. Therefore, if a game's world building chooses to program every member of a species to destroy, aren't they more like the tornado?
This is literally the dumbest analogy you could have pulled because wind is wind. They don't have a moral compass for anything and it's literally just nature. I would have gotten if you said an animal killed an entire family for their baby's home in a shelter. Are they still evil? That still would have slightly been an eh-ish comparison, but that would have been an improvement from asking if a factor of nature is evil. Also, we're assuming if based off the logic that enemies are programmed in the plot because it was stated, realistically, the enemies aren't going to be programmed to do something in the game because that would have been meta as hell. Unless your plot is about that, which I'll get back to that in a second.
For instance, in Warhammer 40k, this inconsistency is central to the Imperium of Man's villainous creed. Individuals' human choices make them good or evil, whereas aliens are created evil. And of course, Games Workshop made that choice to facilitate a wargame where lethal violence is the only option. But then folks also saw that in the 40k novels and RPGs, which required more interesting narrative complexities, Imperial heroes have to grapple with and recognize the illogic of that creed based on their own experience.
That Purge of Xenos example also doesn't make any sense, because obviously you'd be drawn to siding with the humans in a situation between humans versus aliens. You're their species. You can root for the aliens all you want, but then you have to take time to establish their motives and character. And since you have to make the choice on the spot, you'd have to go with your instincts. That's not a bad development decision, that's being quick on your feet.
It's funny because people think they have the right to bully.
But in that situation, as soon as someone inadvertently feels some empathy, as people often do for anything seeming even vaguely alive, the easy answer becomes less easy. And if the goal of your game is to stop players from engaging in moral debates and just fight some bad guys, you kinda gotta say something more reliable than, "Oh, it's fine, they were all born this way."
But what if they are? What if they can't understand humans' dilemma, so they just go with their instincts or hunt because they want food? And not gonna lie, that leg be looking mad tasty. I ran out of tongue motions I can do.
Fortunately, the real world's made progress on this problem, because sometimes in this day and age, people actually bear visual signifiers which say, "I'm evil, not because of where I was born, but because of the choices I've made," such as Nazi uniforms and clan hoods.
But what if they didn't get to choose, though? What if they were born or drafted into a society where the only way they can live was to conform? There's this thing called brainwashing and propaganda. I think you need to read it up.
Then in fiction, we have things like the Hydra logo, a clear visual signifier, but one that denotes choice, not birth. And if the statement that a game is making with its backstory and symbols is that an enemy had a choice, and they chose wrong, then that gets way less complicated for a game that's interested in uncomplicated violence.
But killing someone born evil would be more of a moral kill. They were born into that environment and there were no possibility of them seeing the light, while as someone who chose wrong is immoral. They can have multiple factors to them choosing to be on the other side. Like they wanted to do good but ended up doing bad things in order to get there. They were blinded by someone who ended up fucking their beliefs, or they had prior experiences that shaped them to who they are. And it's also that someone who chose evil is more likely to join the other side. They have a moral complexity and are multifaceted, and have the potential of both good and evil. Look at any rival character ever.
So whether a game does or doesn't want its players to overthink their character's moral choices, evil as a choice is just more effective than evil as a bioessential trait.
Xenomorphs aren't evil, they're just predatory animals. They see humans as a good leg, and they want food in order to survive.
But then of course, if everyone wearing the evil team uniform happens to be an orc, or if every orc happens to have chosen Team Evil, the game wouldn't exactly be communicating that difference very well.
Choice, as in they had or there was an option to be good.
A quick fix here would be to show some diversity in the evil team's hiring practices. For instance, with evil humans and elves as well as orcs.
Or conversely, introduce orcs who have chosen good and neutral as well as evil. And a good example of a series getting better and better at this over time is Mass Effect. Because in the first game, Commander Shepard never meets a nice Batarian or a fun Gnat. But then, spoiler alert, most of these evil species turn out to be as complex and interesting as the human ones as the trilogy progresses.
Broad moral generalizations about species or culture not only doesn't make internal sense, but it also leads to less evocative, less rewarding worlds and games.
Are you? Not to worry. I have a permit. This just says I can do what I want.
How can you make an evil race racially diverse? I'm assuming that your whole spiel was that the orc race was assumed evil. Yes, I can hear you. I'm inside your house. Keyword being race. So how can multiple races be in one race? Sure, you can say that there were multiple evil groups of races that banded together to make a big boy evil team, but no. His basis is that it started out as one and stayed as one. Also, have you ever heard of a twist villain before? Because they'd like to have a talk.
But we can solve that problem by following our best creative instincts. To diversify, deepen, and complicate the worlds we create and its denizens. This way, players won't be incentivized to make snap judgments about our game's orcs or aliens or undead based on moral absolutes or body types.
Even if it isn't necessary, it only makes everything convoluted. And that's how I'll leave things off. Because honestly, this video serves to advise people to complicate everything to an extreme degree. Now, there was a reason I wanted to cover this. Like we said before, I'm a game dev of multiple RPG projects with advanced stories, and seeing this, something that advises people to gatekeep what you can and can't do, that personally offends me. And I just want to say this. Do whatever the fuck you want. Even if it might be perceived as offensive or tropey, this is There are no limits in fiction, and we should leave it like that.
I need you to send Azrael to their next location.
This should be interesting.
You said that the last couple times.
Shut.
Crap. It's already starting again. I need to find him now. 識も信